Picture this, a huge, modern city. I mean, a massive metropolis just humming with millions of people, lit up like its own little galaxy. And then, bam, in a single instant, it all just vanishes. Total darkness. So, how does that even happen? How does an entire city, a marvel of modern engineering, just switch off? Well, that's the mystery we're going to dig into. And hey, this right here, this really shows you the insane scale of what we're talking about. I mean, look on the left. That's the northeastern US and Canada, just about 20 hours before a huge blackout back in 2003. It's this beautiful, vibrant web of light. Now glance over to the right. Just 7 hours later, it's a sea of black. Toronto, gone. Long Island is a ghost. Detroit has just vanished. It's a stark reminder of how completely and how fast our whole world can just flip. So to really get how something like this can happen, we've got to go back in time. Let's head to a very specific moment. New York City, July 13th, 1977. And you have to understand, the city was already a powder keg. It was deep in a nasty financial crisis, suffering through a brutal summer heat wave. And on top of all that, people were absolutely terrified by the Son of Sam murders. So that's the backdrop here. Incredibly tense, incredibly volatile. And this quote from the mayor at the time, Abe Beam, it captures the mood perfectly. Listen to his words. He doesn't say it was an inconvenience, right? He uses the word terror. Because losing power didn't just turn off the lights. It uncorked something in the city. It turned a technical problem, an infrastructure failure, into a full-blown social crisis. His words, they paint this picture of a city under siege, not a city pulling together. And yeah, that crisis had a price tag, a big one. A congressional study put the damages at over $300 million. Now, if you adjust that for inflation, we're talking about roughly $1.5 billion today. That is a staggering amount of money, and it really drives home the real hard economic cost of the lights going out. I mean, the breakdown of just basic order was unbelievable. Just look at these numbers. Over 1,600 stores were damaged or looted. Firefighters had to deal with more than 1,000 fires, and a lot of those were set on purpose. And then there's that last number. Almost 4,000 people arrested. Think about that. It was the largest mass arrest in the city's entire history. It's just a terrifying look at what can happen when the whole system just gives out. So how did this whole thing even begin? Well, it wasn't one giant single catastrophe. Nope. It was a series of smaller things going wrong, like a line of dominoes, falling one after the other, all inside of one really bad hour. So let's actually break down the timeline and see how an entire city went dark. Okay, so it all kicks off at 8:34 p.m. A lightning bolt hits a substation. The circuit breakers, which are basically just giant safety switches, they do exactly what they're supposed to do, and they trip offline. Fine. But then, 20 minutes later, another lightning strike takes out 2 more critical transmission lines. Think of these as the superhighways for electricity. Now the system is starting to really feel the strain. By 9:19, the last major connection to upstate New York just gives up. It's a thermal overload, which means the lines literally got too hot from trying to carry too much juice. Then, just 10 minutes later, the link to New Jersey trips. All of a sudden, the city's power company, Con Edison, is completely isolated. It's an island. And by 9:37 p.m., a little over an hour from that first lightning strike, it's game over. The entire system just shuts down. And this is the key question, isn't it? Our power grid is supposed to be built with backups, with fail-safes. So why in the world did a couple of lightning strikes, what the power company first called an act of God, end up causing a total citywide collapse? Well, the answer is all in the science of how these really complex systems fall apart. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of this. The phenomenon has a name. It's called a cascading failure. And it's not just something that happens to power grids. You see the exact same thing in financial markets, in supply chains, heck, even in ecosystems. It's basically the science of the domino effect, just on a huge, huge scale. So here's the core idea. In a big, interconnected system like the power grid, when one piece fails, the electricity it was carrying, its load, doesn't just disappear, poof. It has to go somewhere. So it instantly gets shoved onto other parts of the network. Now, those parts are under way more stress, and if that extra stress is too much for them, well, they fail too, and they dump their load, plus the new load, onto the next set of lines. You see where this is going? Each failure makes the stress on the rest of the system worse and worse, and you get this runaway chain reaction. The first problem doesn't get contained, it spreads and gets bigger, and it just takes the whole network down with it.
And here's the thing, the cascade doesn't stop with the power grid. All of our critical infrastructure is tangled together, it's all interdependent. So when the power goes out, everything else is suddenly at risk. I mean, think about it, right? Airports can't function, car tunnels have to close because the ventilation fans stop working, even your water supply can fail because the pumps that push up through the pipes, they're electric. So one single failure point just ripples out and it threatens every single system that we depend on.
Now, you don't have to be a math whiz to get the gist of this. Scientists use these incredibly complex models like this admittance matrix you see here to try and map out the grid's weak spots. They're trying to figure out where the next domino might fall. But it is unbelievably hard to do. The grid is just so complex, there are so many variables, so many things interacting in unpredictable ways, that it develops what scientists call emergent properties. That just means it does things you could never predict just by looking at its individual parts. And get this, the official report on that 2003 blackout, the one we saw in the pictures earlier, it listed inadequate system understanding as the #1 cause. That is a pretty stunning admission, right? We've built these systems that are so complex that sometimes we don't even fully understand how they work. Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We've got the story of what happened in 1977, and we've got the science behind these cascading failures. So what does all this really teach us about the infrastructure we rely on, every single day? What are the lessons we're supposed to learn from the darkness? Well, this comparison here tells a really powerful story. See, New York City had another massive blackout back in 1965, but people remember that one almost fondly. It was a time when strangers were helping each other out, communities really came together. But fast forward just 12 years to 1977, and the exact same type of event triggers total chaos. What was the difference? It wasn't the technology, it wasn't the grid, it was the city itself. And that shows you something really important. The stability of our infrastructure, it's not just about wires and transformers. It's deeply, deeply connected to the health of our society. And that brings us right back to today. Our reliance on electricity is, it's absolute. Our communication, our economy, our entire lives, they're all built on this one simple assumption, that the lights will stay on. We saw how just a couple of lightning strikes kicked off a catastrophic cascade more than 40 years ago. So the real final question is this. In a world that is so much more complex, so much more interconnected than 1977, how strong is the system we all depend on? Is our grid really, truly ready for the next storm?